Hello friend, welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Kimberly. Today I'd like to show you what I do to preserve some of my homegrown cabbage. So I harvested this from my garden and I'm going to ferment it and make sauerkraut. The process is really simple. It just requires the cut up cabbage, and then I'm going to use 2% salt by weight. So that'll be a little bit new to me to be that accurate and measure it, but I'm really getting into the metric system and using grams. So I'm going to use 2% by weight in grams of salt, and then just pack it all into a clean jar, and then it'll just take time to ferment. So the first step is just to get the cabbage cut up. What I want to do is remove some of these outer leaves to save for putting across the top. I'll show you later why that's important. So my goal is to fill this jar. I'm not sure if I have just the right amount of cabbage, maybe a little too much or too little, but I have another cabbage I can use if I don't have quite enough. So I'm just going to start by quartering this, and then I've got my bowl. Take out that hard core, and then I'll just start cutting it up. Now if you wanted to, you could use a mandolin or a food processor or something like that to make this go faster. But today I'm just going to cut it up like this. I'm going to cut it as thin as I can, and I don't want my shreds too long, so I'm just going to cut them in half there. So I've cut up half of the cabbage so far, and now my bowl is full. I chose this bowl today because I want to be able to use it on my scale and read the number on the scale. My bigger bowl, I won't be able to. So I'm going to go ahead and measure this cabbage and calculate the salt, and then I'll put it in a bigger bowl where I can get it to start wilting from the salt. When I add that salt and mix it in with the cabbage, the liquid from the cabbage is going to start coming out. The salt will draw it out. So let me measure this. Now I pre-measured my bowl so that I can subtract that. And it comes out to 1432. Now I know my bowl weighed 302, so that gives me 1130. So that would be 22.6 grams of salt that I need. So let me get a little bowl. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to move this to a bigger bowl and add that amount of salt, and then I'll keep cutting. It's hard to know how much cabbage it's going to take to really fill my jar because I'll be able to pack it in pretty tight. So now I'm just going to start massaging this salt into the cabbage so it can begin wilting. I'll set that aside while I keep chopping. Okay, it looks like I've got 1387 grams. I need to subtract the weight of my bowl, which was 302, which puts me at 1085. So I'm just going to move that decimal point over. I'm going to round the 85 up to another gram. So I've got 11 times 2 to get my 2%. So 11 would be 1%, and then I need 22 grams of salt. So that's very close to what the other half weighed. So I'm going to zero out the weight of my bowl and then add my 22 grams of salt. Grams are so accurate, but it doesn't have to be perfect. In the past, I've just salted it according to some general guidelines, like a tablespoon per head of cabbage or something like that. But today I'm being more precise for the video. And a head of cabbage can mean a lot of different things. I know in my own garden, some of my heads of cabbage are really small and some are huge. So I'm happy to have these more accurate guidelines to use and to share with you. So let me get this all put in the one big bowl now. Get in there with my clean hands and really kind of squeeze the cabbage. I want it to give up its juice. I want to make sure I have the salt well incorporated with the cabbage. This cabbage is still pretty crunchy. Now what I want to do is just let this cabbage sit here for about 10 minutes while the salt draws out the juices, and then I'll get started packing it in my jar. So while we're waiting for this cabbage to wilt down just a little bit, I'm going to do a few things. One thing I'm going to do is take these big cabbage leaves and just cut down the center of this core to make this a little bit more pliable. I'll do that on both of these. And just set those aside. We'll need them in a few minutes. And then I want to show you some of the sauerkraut that I've made before. Now, once you make this sauerkraut, once the cabbage has been fermented, it will keep a very long time in the refrigerator. This is some that I made about a year ago. And you can ferment this for more or less time depending on your preferences. Once I start fermenting this, I can taste it every so often. After a few weeks, I can taste it and see if it's as sour as I want it to be or if I want to ferment it longer. So let me give this a taste. That's really good. It has a nice bright flavor. I really like the color of the purple cabbage, but it also can stain. So I thought I would be smart to make some from the green cabbage. So I'm ready to start packing this. I've got nice clean hands. And I'm just going to be using my wooden rolling pin as a tamper to really press the cabbage down and get all the air out of it. So sauerkraut has lots of health benefits, lots of probiotics. It's interesting and pretty cool that we can make our own probiotics at home with simple ingredients. Now, some people might have a hard time with this much salt, And if you need to avoid salt for some reason, you can still make sauerkraut. There is a way to make it without salt. What you would do is you would take 2 heads of cabbage, you would juice one of them and slice the other one, and use the juice from the one to cover the other in the jar and provide the liquid that you can ferment the cabbage in. I personally have not ever done it that way, but I have seen it done. I don't have any problem with the salt because I don't eat this in large quantities. Usually I'll just add a little bit to a salad or maybe to a wrap. It looks like it is all going to fit. I might even need to chop up some more of the other cabbage. It's amazing how it packs down. Okay, I think I need about a quarter of another cabbage. I'm going to get that cut up and I'll see you back here. That quarter of a cabbage was just the right amount to finish filling my jar. And now as I press down on it, you can see just how much liquid has been released from that cabbage. And that's really what we're looking for. So now what's important is to do something to keep all of those shreds of cabbage beneath the surface of that liquid. I have used fermentation weights, and I do have some of those, but they're too small for this large jar. So I find that using these cabbage leaves that we reserved at the beginning works good for that purpose. And this jar has these nice wide shoulders. I can tuck the edges of this cabbage leaf under those shoulders and it'll hold everything in place. Now I'm going to put this on my pantry shelf and I'm going to check it maybe once a week or so and look for any signs of anything that's rising above the surface that may begin to mold, and I can remove that quickly. As it begins to ferment, lots of bubbles are going to form all throughout, and those bubbles need to be able to escape. So you notice I've left some space at the top so that as the fermentation happens and the level of everything begins to rise, I'm not going to have that liquid spilling over the top. I want to cover this with some type of a cloth. I can secure it with a rubber band. That will keep any kind of flies from getting into my sauerkraut and allow that air to escape. But that's really how simple it is. The first cloth I used, I wasn't happy with because it was absorbing the liquid, so I switched it out for something different. But this is basically what it looked like going into the fermentation process. So it's really that simple, and I hope you'll enjoy that. Thanks for joining me. Bye, friend.